afternoon, and welcome to the Los Angeles Times B2B Publishing's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Forum. I'm Anna Magzanian, Chief of Staff to the Executive Chairman and Head of Strategy and Revenue for the Los Angeles Times. I'm happy to welcome you to our forum featuring diversity and inclusion experts from Southern California business community. Their dedication to equality and advocacy in the workplace, combined with their effort to fight exclusion and bring inclusivity to their organizations, all while facing challenges related to COVID-19 pandemic, is admirable. They are proof of the value of leadership, kindness, and above all, hard work. Belonging is good for business. Thank you for driving change in the workforce and striving to help workers feel accepted and valued. This forum would not be possible without the support of our platinum sponsors, starting with our diamond sponsor, California State University Northridge, GHJ, and our platinum sponsor, Hub International. Thanks to each of the organizations for your support. Today, we're presenting two in-depth conversations on disability inclusion in the workplace and inclusive leadership and belonging. Before we get to the first panel, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for the program, Crystal Perez. Crystal is a diversity advocate and entrepreneur who has been both a student and champion for diversity and inclusion for more than a decade. From tech startups to the music business, television industry, she began her career working as an intern at BET Networks and continued to work closely with executives in the industry throughout her career. Crystal currently supports the Executive Vice President Enterprise Inclusion and Social Responsibility at Endemol Shine North America. Previously, she supported the Vice President of D&I Creative Programming at Sony Pictures Entertainment, helping to coordinate both the Diverse Writers and Directors Program. Thank you for being here today, Crystal.
Thank you so much, Anna. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Crystal Perez. I am a diversity advocate and entrepreneur. Over the last decade, I've been both a student and champion for diversity and inclusion. From working with tech startups to the music business and the television and film industries. And in the past year, I've also been developing my own business, Vibes, which is an e-commerce clothing brand with a primary focus to collaborate and highlight BIPOC individuals. While working in rooms with executives in all areas of the industry, I've learned a lot. But the one thing that stood out was the importance of mentorship, not only in my own career, but also the careers of others. Mentorship plays a significant role in the D&I space because it allows for access and opportunity. My personal journey began when I was an intern at BET and I was first exposed to what life was like on set. I was able to learn about the production world from start to finish and meet people in all areas of the business. We need people to advocate for underrepresented folks because it allows for access and opportunity when speaking on diversity and inclusion. Because being in the room holds a life-changing experience for individuals in all areas of the business. As a Jersey City, New Jersey native and first-generation Latina, these ideas of mentorship hold great significance even in my own story. And without them, I wouldn't be here speaking to you guys today. A few ways that companies can advance D&I initiatives is by partnering with organizations that pipeline underrepresented talent for internships and entry-level positions. By doing this, companies source diverse candidates not only by their professional and/or educational background, but also by accessibility and social economical status as well. Some effective practices to advance D&I within an organization are developing employee resource groups, also known as ERGs. In doing this, it allows for environments where employees can create an inclusive company culture, as well as get to know their fellow employees. Companies and our studios can also create programs within their own organization to allow for internal development for above and below the line positions, such as fellowships, workshops that promote growth to advance placement for opportunities. By doing this, we open doors for those otherwise would have a more stagnant growth in their respective career. Also, it will add diversity, not only in gender, race, and ethnic background, but also in skill set and creativity as well. The impact that D&I holds in the workplace is that it provides a bridge between the gap of access and opportunity. According to the UCLA Hollywood Diversity Report, only 1.5 out of 10 show creators in the digital scripted space are people of color. We need to do better. And according to NerdWallet, inclusive companies are 120% more likely to hit financial goals. And they're also 1.7 times more innovative. Adding diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility initiatives will allow for more forward-thinking organizations to grow and stay current in current company culture. Thank you so much. And back to you, Anna.
Let's kick things off with our first panel, Accessibility Matters, Disability Inclusion in the Workplace. The panel will be moderated by Marianne Keller and features Sue Chen, Marlene Carpata, Elaine Hall, and Catherine Perez. Marianne Keller leads GHJ's growth strategy for business development and marketing. With more than 30 years' experience, Keller successfully expands business by applying an integrated, client-centric approach. Marianne has been active in the community, especially for disability awareness, for almost 2 decades. She currently serves on the board of Autism Society of Los Angeles and as a frequent speaker for disability awareness, transition to adulthood, and impact on families. I will now turn it over to Marianne to introduce our panelists.
Thank you, Anna. I'm very honored to be part of this important discussion. As a professional with multiple invisible disabilities, this topic is of great importance to me, but also to the 25% of the US population in the workforce with visible and invisible disabilities. I'd like to remind everyone listening today that the closed captioning is available on YouTube. At the bottom right-hand corner, you can access this by clicking the button that has a C-C. Now, please allow me to start by introducing our panelists. We'll have each of them also provide self-descriptors before we begin. And I'll start before I introduce the first panelist. Again, I'm Marianne Keller. I'm a hearing impaired Caucasian woman in her 50s. I have shoulder length brown hair, a black shirt against a light colored background. And the first panelist I'm going to introduce today is Sue Chen. Sue is an entrepreneur, shark advocate, hazelnut farmer, and struggling pianist. As the CEO of Nova Medical Products, Sue is changing the way people embrace aging and tackle physical challenges with innovative and stylish products. In her book, Confessions of a Walker Stalker, Sue chronicles her journey and mission to unleash and ignite human ability. Combining her passion for ocean conservation and human ability, Sue is the co-founder of Operation Blue Pride, an organization supporting veterans through scuba diving and ocean education. As a community champion for the Annenberg Foundation, Sue has coached and mentored over 100 nonprofit organizations, including the CNN Heroes. And thanks to Sue, at a fancy event that I got to attend Saturday night, I had a wonderful cane that I got to use that I sometimes need that matched my beautiful outfit and got many compliments. So welcome, Sue.
It's my joy and pleasure to be here in Marianne, a beautiful cane for a beautiful lady. I am a 51-year-old Asian woman with long black hair, and I'm on the shorter side at 5'2".
Thank you, Sue. Next, we have Elaine Hall. Elaine Hall is the founder and artistic director of the Miracle Project, a fully inclusive film and theater program profiled in the 2-time Emmy-winning HBO film, Autism the Musical. She is considered a pioneer in creating neurodiverse original content for film and theater, and is also a co-founder of the 1 in 4 Coalition. As a technical advisor, script consultant, accessibility coordinator, and on-set advocate coach, Elaine has worked with TV and film writers, directors, actors, and production companies to help assure their content authentically portrays individuals of all abilities and disabilities. Elaine is a consultant to and a 6-time invited speaker by the United Nations. Her memoir, Now I See the Moon, was the official selection for World Autism Awareness Day by the United Nations. Elaine provides trainings and does keynote speaking nationally and internationally. Welcome, Elaine.
Thank you, Marianne. So good to be here with all of you. I'm a petite woman with brown hair, hazel eyes, and I'm wearing a bright blue jacket with flowers, scarf, and behind me is a purple orchid.
Thank you, Elaine. Our next panelist is Marlene Kripata, and Marlene graduated from Virginia Tech with a degree in aerospace engineering, which led her to enter in the Army as an enlisted soldier for the Loan Repayment Program. 3 years later, she was accepted to Officer Candidate School. In 1997, she was pinned as an officer, and in 2004, she was called up to active duty to serve a tour in Kosovo as the tactical intelligence officer for the brigade battle commander. Based on information gathering there, she was given orders to report for an immediate deployment to Iraq and work with the U.S. Special Forces Command. On August 14th, 2006, she was hit with indirect mortar fire that severely damaged her right leg. This resulted in her right leg being amputated 3 years later and her medical retirement from the Army as a captain. Her decorations include Meritorious Service Medal 2 times, Army Commendation Medal 2 times, National Defense Service Medal with Bronze Star, Iraq Campaign Medal with Campaign Star, and Kosovo Campaign Medal with a Bronze Star. Marlene now works for UBS Financial as a financial intelligence analyst. She understands how to utilize ADA regulations so that she minimizes as many hurdles as she can with her employer. Welcome, Marlene.
Thank you, Marianne. I am very glad to be here. A 50-year-old woman trying to keep her 40s, and I've gained a few pounds from my Army days. I'm wearing my favorite sweatshirt, from Virginia Tech here, and I'm sitting at my home desk here in my bedroom.
Thanks so much, Marlene. Our final panelist today is Catherine Perez. Catherine is the inaugural director of the Coelho Center for Disability Law, Policy, and Innovation. She is a current doctoral candidate in disability studies at the University of Illinois at Chicago, where she is writing a dissertation on the Berger Supreme Court cases on the criminal legal system and mental disability. Catherine writes about and presents on disability and immigration law and policy. Her article, A Critical Race and Disability Legal Studies Approach to Immigration Law and Policy, advocates for an intersectional approach to understanding immigration that considers disability as well as a multidisciplinary approach that combines grassroots activism with legal work. Catherine teaches a disability rights law course at Loyola Law School as a visiting professor of law. As a queer, disabled woman of color and granddaughter of Mexican immigrants, Catherine's lived experience informs her approach to intersectional justice. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I am a light-skinned Latina woman with long brown hair. I wear glasses. I'm wearing a blue top with flowers on it, and I'm sitting in front of a bookcase with some Christmas decorations already on it, including a wreath. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for being here today. This is so exciting. Kind of a thrill, some personal heroes here. I'd love to dive right into the first question, if I may. And Catherine, I'm going to start with you, if I may. And then we'll have others chime in, but can you define accessibility in the workplace in your experience and what it actually means from how you see the world?
Sure. In 2018, I went to a disability intersectionality summit, And I had the pleasure of hearing a keynote from Mia Mingus, and her keynote was titled "Disability Justice is Simply Another Word for Love." And she talked about access as love, with the aim to help build a world where accessibility is understood as an act of love instead of a burden or an afterthought. So I just wanted to start there as a larger concept. And next, I think we need to think about accessibility in employment from the starting place of viewing people as full of capacity and having expectation that people are going to be successful. And therefore, we don't think about changing the person, we think about changing the environment. So that's really taking a social model approach of disability as opposed to what we call a medical model of disability. And then lastly, if you can't get on board with the access as love or the social model of disability, which I hope you do, you can think of accessibility as a civil right, as a legal responsibility for an employer to provide accommodations to people with disabilities. But I will actually lastly say, if you do take the approach of access as love and universal access and thinking of people as full capacity, you're creating an employment environment that is accessible not only to people with disabilities, but you're creating a culture in which everyone will start to feel more accepted.
Thanks a lot for that, Catherine. And I'm going to go now to other panelists and see if there's anything to add to that. Marlene, do you mind if I go to you next?
Most definitely. I'm gonna add on to what Catherine said. Is as a person of disability working in my workplace, I perform at my best if you are able to, provide a safe and, environment for me. For a person who has obviously the physical disability of the amputation, but also the mental of a person living with PTSD from war. There's two accessible demands that I have, not demands, I'm sorry, needs that I have. And working with my employer, both of those were able to come to a conclusion, and it might not be perfect, but it works and it allows me to come to work every day, not thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to make it work for me today, or mentally straining to me, but actually allowing me to come in and be happy and be able to work at my 100%. So it's allowing your employees like me work at 100% and know that I have my employer who has my back.
That's great. Thank you, Marlene. And Sue, I'm curious what your thoughts are in terms of the definition of accessibility in the workplace.
Well, I must share to everyone out there that Marlene and I are close friends, and we're scuba diving buddies, and we have spent a lot of time together. And in that time together, it has made me a better human being, and most importantly, a better employer, to understand that access to ability is access to someone's full ability. And that's not just physical, but it's intellectual and also emotional. And that awareness has been invaluable for me as an employer in understanding full accessibility.
Elaine, what would you like to add to that?
So I think that we can also broaden the term of accessibility in that what's right for someone who uses a wheelchair, what's right for someone who has sensory processing differences, what's right for someone with a disability is actually can be right for everyone. Caitlin Yang, one of the co-founders of 1 in 4, speaks about, she's a wheelchair user and a brilliant special effects expert. And she speaks about how a ramp was created on one of the sets that she worked on. And because the ramp was created originally for her access, it saved the production company hours and money because everyone was using that ramp. So when we start to think about accessibility you would think we're doing something, obviously we're doing something kind and equitable. It's actually can be better for all.
That's fantastic. And that kind of leads us into the next question that I'm really curious about is why does access matter to employees and why does it matter to employers? And Sue, I'm going to start with you as an employer, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off on that question.
Sure. Well, for every company, your goal is to further the mission. And to be able to further that mission continuously and dynamically in an ever-changing environment, you have to create an ecosystem to allow your greatest asset, and that's your people, to be able to not just survive, but thrive. And then, in addition to that, having a workplace that is fully accessible to the entire human being creates a culture of empathy and empowerment. And that culture of shared empathy, shared empowerment, to really understand and celebrate each other completely creates strength. It creates stealth strength in any organization and allows that company to further that mission. So that's why full accessibility is the most important thing, I believe, that any company can do.
Yeah. And Marlene, I'm going to go to you from an employee's standpoint in a second, but I just wanted to chime in and say, I was diagnosed around 6 years ago or so with a chronic illness that causes a fair amount of needs for accommodation. And had I not worked for an amazing organization that was willing to provide a ton of flexibility to me, I would not be able to do the role that I do today. And I think my employer would say I do a pretty darn good job, and that would have been a shame for my employer and for me. But lo and behold, what happened was that the pandemic happened, and a lot of the accommodation needs that I had are now sort of to the point that was made before, now becoming more commonplace in terms of how folks can adapt and be remote and so forth. And so Marlene, from your standpoint as an employee, how would you explain that to us in terms of how important it is to you to have an employer that is focused on that?
It's very important. I've worked with an employer who was horrible about it, who wouldn't move a bookcase that blocked my wheelchair from me getting into my desk. And what that fosters is just, negativity and, a not worthiness to do a job. And mentally that just, breaks you down. If the employer's not willing to move a bookcase so I can get to my desk, it makes you feel unworthy. To an employer who goes, okay, we need to get you the desk. Even though I'm not in my wheelchair all the time, there's times I'm going to need it. And so they're like, yep, we're going to make sure there are no cords underneath. Fosters that, unity, that everyone's important to that employer. And that's what people with disabilities needs. They need that accessibility to feel like they're needed, that they are, especially when they're first, either if they're new into their disability, especially, or, they're still growing with their accessibility. You mentioned, the pandemic. The pandemic is throwing a big, torque wrench. Of course, in my own home, I have my own accessible, items that I use, my knee cart to get around and stuff. But for the mental aspect and PTSD, we've really had to work to figure out how that depression and that, for me, I get a kind of an anxiety, it's a hard shell for me, and I need my work. I need my work peeps. I need to get out to keep me, from going overboard or overthinking things. And so it's been great. Boss that goes, okay, we're going to meet so many times a month, and Zoom meetings. And so there are ways we've gotten around this and to really work and keep us all interested. But that's, again, ability and using the tools that we have during this pandemic.
That's great, Marlene. Thank you. And Elaine, may I ask you the same in terms of why it's important to employers and employees?
There's a Buddhist tale that the difference between heaven and hell. And in one room, there's a beautiful, bountiful feast. And there are 12 people sitting around the table, and they're emaciated because they have 6 feet chopsticks and they can't feed themselves. And then there's another room with this beautiful, bountiful feast and 12 people sitting around the table, and they have 6-foot chopsticks. And the people are wonderful, Buddha belly, happy, cheerful people because they're feeding each other. And I think that's what true accessibility does for a workplace. Everybody has strengths and challenges. And in an environment that tunes in to what is one person's asset, maybe another person's deficit, you create this robust, round, joyous environment. And Marianne, I learned from you years ago, you say, we don't want to be included, we want to belong. So when we're listening as employers, when we're listening, tuning in to what everyone needs to be at their best, you're creating an accessible community, you're creating a robust workplace and a place where everyone belongs and wants to give their best.
Hear, hear. So, Catherine, what are you thinking from an employer-employee standpoint? Anything to add on this?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said before. When you start making disabled folks feel like they belong and that they're welcome, it has a ripple effect on your entire employees. But also, I just wanted to plug that there's been studies showing that companies that are including people with disabilities are having higher revenues, that the newer generations like mine, the millennial and Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, they want to work in places that are more diverse. They want to work in places that have DEIA, disability, equity, inclusion, and accessibility goals and are meeting those goals. So you start recruiting more diverse talent, especially for industries that are maybe having talent pool issues, right? You start increasing the pipeline. And then lastly, I just want to say, to employers that when you hire people with disabilities, you're hiring folks who are the original innovators, right? We as disabled folks exist in a society that wasn't necessarily constructed for us. So we have to think outside the box, and we have to constantly innovate. And therefore, when you hire diverse folks, including folks with disabilities, in your place of employment, you're getting the diversity of thought, diversity of innovation, and all of that is just going to benefit your place of employment incredibly.
Yeah, and Catherine, you touched on something so important that I'm glad is coming up, which is in my profession. So I'm in the accounting profession and advisory, business advisory, and we're always struggling with the talent pipeline. That's always a challenge. How do we attract the great people that we'd like to have come to our profession? But now more than ever, it's so difficult to get the kind of talent in our profession. And now, of course, we know the year of the Great Resignation. It goes across every industry. There's no industry that hasn't been touched by that. And again, a plug for the fact that when we roll out a red carpet and a welcome mat for people of any DEIA consideration, we're saying you're welcome here, and we want you to be here and to belong. And that creates a huge advantage as an employer. And I'll just say, I'm really proud of my firm in that we have become a destination of attraction compared to our peers. And I'll be honest, in great part because of our DEIA approach to belonging. And so that moves us on to, though, a little bit deeper on the pandemic and hybrid work environment. Marlene and I kind of touched on it. But, Marlene, I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit further about that in terms of some of the pros and cons that the pandemic and the hybrid work environment have made us aware of, and some of the things that it's brought to the fore. And clearly mental health, I think we have a general sensitivity at a higher level now as a on the planet. I'll just say, probably in the US, but on the planet, than we probably did before. So Marlene, what other thoughts might you have to add to that?
It's significant. So, my company now we're going back to a hybrid work, which I think a lot of companies are going to, because they're realizing when their full workforce went to work from home, their revenues, stayed where it was at or even increased. So they're realizing the benefit, and even a lot of companies, sold off a lot of their corporate So the hybrid in my workplace they're going to kind of like that hotel reservation. And what has happened, though, is my desk is fitted for me. It's fitted for my accommodations, how it faces the door. So I'm, not about things happening, not worried about what's behind my back. And so the first thing I did once I came out of, hey, there's this hybrid hotel desk, was call up HR, send the note to the services and go, hey, how are we going to work this? This desk was specifically set up, per my, doctor's notes and our meetings and so on. So, it made them aware of, oh yeah, shoot. We haven't been thinking about that. And it actually took them a couple of months, and thank goodness they'd put it out before we started going back, a couple of months of, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And once they really got it in play, they had the facilities manager working on this. And so that desk is not going to be reserved out. It'll be blocked, for me, so I don't have to worry about it again. And so that's some of the things that these employers are going to have to start working with once you go back to this hybrid workplace to make sure the accommodations, stay in place for people that already have accommodations. And I don't think, HR is already, these companies are working hard to try to figure out what the new look looks like. And sometimes maybe the accommodations and accessibility is not totally in the forefront. So you always have to be an advocate for yourself and just make sure it's not the company's fault, but, open up that dialogue again with them so that you make sure that you're taken care of, and they want to take care of you. So you just make sure you get in contact with them so that everything is good for you and you can continue to perform 100% for your company.
Yeah, I love that concept of self-advocacy. That speaks to us so strongly. And I'll just say, as a hearing impaired person, the mask wearing has been a little tricky because I read lips. So as you can imagine, it creates some interesting challenges to be in a mask-wearing environment. And a lot of times I'll have to, self-advocate and, create ways that I can stay informed despite the mask wearing. Elaine, can I ask you about the impact of the pandemic and new hybrid work environment?
So, being a neurodiverse individual, part of the sheltering at home was actually an asset to me. Without forced social interaction, even though I enjoy it, I'm much calmer. And in creating my own, I love what Catherine said about creating, we're the original innovators. At the Miracle Project, we immediately pivoted to a virtual classes and trainings, and actually wrote an original musical that the individuals self-taped and audio taped. And that was in 2020. And then this year, we started the year by developing an original musical completely virtual. So we were never in the same room with each other, and developed a film, an actual 40-length film called Journey to Namu, which celebrates neurological differences and different disabilities, about being accepted and appreciated and belonging for who they are. So we kind of used the pandemic in a way to innovate a whole new way of creating art. And then we were able to reveal the film at the Wallace Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts, which is an accessible theater, one of the nicest theaters in Los Angeles. And it's what I love about the Wallace is that every single space is accessible. So that, and then we had a sign language interpreter, as well as we auto-described the film prior, so that people could, those who are blind or low vision, were able to understand the film, the visuals that were happening. So it allowed us to be even more of who we are. And I think it presented new opportunities for composers, for musicians, for actors, for singers. On Zoom, we are all one.
Yeah, that's great. That's right. On Zoom, we're all one. And so, Catherine, what are your thoughts about that? The pandemic, the new hybrid work environment?
Yeah, well, not to get too academic, but I kind of laugh a little that the pandemic demonstrated this concept of interest convergence, which is that when the interests of the majority are being threatened, then that's when change happens. So folks with disabilities have been asking to do, a virtual or hybrid workspaces, forever now. And for some reason, employers were just reticent to make that happen. And then we had a pandemic where essentially it became an issue for the majority. And how quickly did we shift to a virtual workspace, and prove so quickly that we were able to sustain it and even thrive in that sort of space. So, I think there's a lesson there that, we really should listen to. I don't even want to say the minority, because you've pointed out that, the CDC has said 1 in 4 people have a disability, 1 in 4 adults have a disability. And to that point too, I want to say, I think the pandemic has brought more people into our community, into our disability community. So welcome. You mentioned a lot of folks are experiencing symptoms of mental illness or mental health issues that they haven't before. Welcome to my life. I've experienced mental illness since my youth, and I know a lot of people have been sharing, similar symptoms over the past couple of years that they haven't before. So, welcome to our community. Folks are acquiring long COVID. So I think this experience has sort of sensitized people into what disability rights is, without, by giving them like their own personal experience.
Yeah, hear, hear. And Sue, I'll finish with you before we go into a final lightning round, because we're getting close on time. And so anything to add on the impact of the pandemic or about hybrid workplace?
I think Catherine said it so well that the pandemic threatened accessibility for everyone. All of a sudden, everyone had fear going to work. And, my entire workforce was afraid, every day. And most of them were essential and they had to go into the office. Some people could work from home. But I think there we were able to demonstrate, and I think it shows that we need to demonstrate this all the time, that we care, that we're listening, that we're here for you. And we're going to look around and see what we can do every day, every week, every month to make sure that you are cared for. And I hope that remains. Like Catherine said, that made the fear that people with disabilities have to go through every day. All of a sudden, everyone had to go through it. But it elevated that level of caring and empathy, and I hope that remains.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so I'm going to finish us off for timing purposes because we're really right at the edge here. I'm going to ask each of you to just give a soundbite, if you could. And the question is, how can we increase opportunities and eliminate barriers for those who need greater access in the workplace? And so if you were speaking to an employer, give us your soundbite. And Elaine, I'm going to start with you.
In my work in the entertainment field, I ask that everyone allow individuals that have that are disabled, neurodiverse, to get an opportunity to share their talent. Ask them first what they can do, rather than having a preconceived idea of what they cannot do. You'd be amazed. Casting authentically scripts that are written for and by and with individuals with disabilities, understanding environments that are conducive for all can be incredibly helpful as we move towards a DEIA. And I'm going to ask everyone to add the A.
That's great. And Marlene, would you mind with your soundbite on increasing opportunity and eliminating barriers?
For the employee, you do have to be your own advocate, but you have to get rid of that fear. Put it in writing, send it to HR, and know your ADA law. The law does have your back, and you need to just work with your company. And for the employers, listen to your employee. Most employees want to work. They don't want to go out and take disability. They want to get in and feel like they're useful.
Sue, how about you?
What I'll share is that for NOVA, we experienced shared empathy for the people that we serve. And that shared empathy became shared strength. And that shared strength shifted the attitude that we had for our products. And we realized that we don't make products for people who are disabled. We make products for people who are badass, abled, like yourself and Marlene.
Yeah, thank you. And Catherine, will you finish us off with your thoughts on this?
Sure, just for employers to know that there are a lot of resources and policies and programs out there that are doing really great innovative stuff to support employers. We have programs like customized employment, job mentoring, job coaching, supported employment. There's resources like Ask Jan, the Job Accommodation Network. You just literally go to askjan.org. There's also askearn.org, I think it is. There's a ton of disability resources. Our federal government has the Office of Disability Employment Policy, so ODEP. So lots of stuff out there and lots of resources, programs, folks who are willing to help, lots of disability organizations, like where I work at the Quello Center and other, leading disability rights organizations who are there to support folks who are ready to make the leap in making a more accessible, inclusive, belonging environment.
That says it, yeah. And I have to say, I hate to end because these are four of my heroes here, and we could go on and on. But Thank you. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Marlene. And it's been a real honor and a pleasure to have this conversation. And for those folks that are out there, if you're an employee and you are in the disability world, I hope you're listening to some of the tips here that you heard in terms of self-advocating and how to create space and make sure you own your space in the workplace. And if you're an employer, I hope that if more revenue and more talent and greater results matter to you, then take our advice and really open up a space and roll out the welcome mat for folks in the disability community, because you will be really surprised by the incredible results that you see occur and the innovation that takes place as a result. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Anna.
Thank you all. Moving on to our second panel, a conversation centered on inclusive leadership and belonging. Our panelists are Dr. Erica Beck, Andrew Forcelli, Dr. Thiele Thatch, and our moderator, Sahar Andrade. Sahar is a diversity, global leadership, personal transformation speaker, and a consultant. She's also an official member of the Forbes Coach Council and was voted one of the 20 most successful businesswomen to watch in 2020 by the Global Insights Success magazine. She is a USC adjunct professor for the Multicultural Executive Women Leadership Program, as well as an instructor at UC Irvine teaching DEI and unconscious bias. Welcome, Sahar.
Thank you, Anna. I am so excited to be part of this important discussion that is vital to today's environment: diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Please allow me to introduce our panelists for today. We have a great panel for you today. First, Dr. Erica Beck. She began her tenure as president of California State University, Northridge in January of 2021. Prior to her appointment, she has served as president of California State University, Channel Islands since 2016, and as provost and executive vice president at Nevada State College. A strong advocate for the power of higher education to improve lives, transform the community, and promote social mobility. President Beck works to ensure the academic success of students so that they can become leaders in their communities and excel in today's rapidly changing economy and society. This focus includes an unwavering commitment to advancing equity, inclusion, and justice in service of a brighter and more equitable future. Now, let me introduce you to Andrew Forcelli. Andrew is the regional executive for Hub's Los Angeles and Orange County operations. Hub International is a leading full-service global insurance broker and financial services firm providing risk management, insurance, employee benefits, retirement, and wealth management products and services. In his role, Andrew oversees a team of over 400 colleagues, 2/3 of which are female, and nearly 50% identify themselves as a minority. He is passionate about the importance of culture in building high-performing teams and driving long-term business success. He was instrumental in the founding of what's become the Hub Women Network and is the executive champion for Hub's local DEI committee called LA Voices. Now let me introduce Dr. Thiele Thatch. She leads diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in corporations, on boards, and in communities with more than 2 decades of experience as human resources, talent management, and organizational development. She is passionate about building internal cultures and external communities with an authentic commitment to inclusion, equity, and diversity thrives. Thiele is a published author of a children's book titled The Dog Chef and has written shorter pieces for several publications. Her latest book, Inclusionomics, is dedicated to the study of inclusion and scheduled for release in 2020. Thiele, we can't wait to read your book. Thank you all for being here today. So before we start our panel here, I just want to let you know that for me, diversity, inclusion, and equity and belonging, as you will see, is part of really of who we are as human beings. So I'm really excited to talk about it today. So let's dive right into the first question. I will start with you, Thiele. Why do you think inclusive leadership is more important than ever now? And how do you apply it in your organization? Thiele?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So inclusive leadership is more important than ever. And let me level set just to talk about the various challenges that we're experiencing in the workplace today. So more than ever, we are experiencing turbulent times due to COVID, social and political unrest, the she-cession, and what some are calling the Great Resignation. And so because of all of these different factors affecting the workplace, we have an opportunity to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion as a way to address the future of work. We don't know exactly what the future holds, but we do know that HR and DEI practitioners and leaders need to be attuned to our employees, aware of the changing laws and regulations, and on high alert for societal changes like the ones that I just mentioned around the she-cession, for example. So as we see, almost 4 million Americans have quit their job, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, since July 2021. We've seen a mass exodus of women leaving the workplace since this year. And so we have an opportunity to meet the needs of these employees as we focus on how can we make sure that they're included, how can we make sure their unique contributions are recognized. And so it's extremely important right now, more than ever, that organizations are able to show that they understand DEI and that they're willing to pay attention and to focus on the needs of diverse and to focus on the needs of diverse employees and applicants. So what are we doing in our organization? I'm sorry, the second part of the question. So for our organization, Paychex, we are focused on intentional inclusion. And so we have created various employee resource groups and I&D committees and different programs, but we've also decided that we weren't going to focus on just programs, but really look at systemic processes that currently exist that may be barriers to inclusion and diversity. We're also looking at our recruiting strategy. How do we source? How do we look for early talent? How do we communicate on social media? So there's a lot of different factors that we're reviewing to make sure that we're prepared to answer the challenge of what does it mean to focus on the future of work, and also how do we respond to those applicants and also our own employees who expect inclusion and diversity to be a priority within the organization.
That is awesome, Stella. And you know, putting in mind that the workforce today is multi-generational, multicultural, multi-gender, diverse teams that keeps evolving into our workplace, and that the inclusive leadership is actually equipped in servant, transformational, and authentic leadership. So I want to hear from Andrew and from Erica. What is your take on inclusive leadership, and how do you apply it in your organizations?
For me, inclusive leadership is really at the epicenter of what we need collectively to realize a brighter future for us all, for many of the reasons that Thiele articulated. And, you know, decades of research really tells us that diverse teams are more innovative, creative, and ultimately they're more successful than homogenous ones. So I think if we want to find solutions to the challenges before us, the broad expanse of societal challenges, they're just increasingly more complex, it seems, every year, and more likely to elicit ideological disagreement. Things like climate change and infectious disease come to mind. We need new thinkers at the table, examining the issues from distinct and often divergent lenses to really get to more innovative solutions. And so I think that by creating an inclusive environment, one that communicates everyone's inherent value and facilitates a sense of belonging for every voice and identity, we can really harness the full richness of diverse ideas and realize our collective potential. And I think that for me, when inclusive leadership is really at its finest, I find that it frames what really matters. And it can be found really in the marrow or the DNA of an organization, in every nook and cranny, in our employees, in our case, in our students, but also in our projects, policies, and practices. And I think that that's where it finds permanency and can really facilitate genuine transformation for an organization.
Beautiful, beautiful. It's awesome. Thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, first, I just want to say thank you for including me in this panel. It's an important topic, and I'm honored to be part of it. I think the explicit answer for us and for me is really thinking about our clients and our employees. They're increasingly demanding it. They have a greater sense of expectation. They have a greater sense of empowerment and voice. And both our clients and our employees are increasingly asking and expecting us to provide a more inclusive and diverse work environment and organization to them. But I think, as Dr. Beck also said, the data is just very clear on the topic that diverse teams are just more successful. They're more productive and are achieving superior results consistently. And so I think as business leaders, all three of those factors come into play. But I also like to really think about the DEI energy and the initiatives that we're doing around DEI and inclusive leadership. I like to sort of step back and say, and sort of remove the DEI lens and say, as a business leader who's constantly challenged with finding and retaining great talent, why would we either intentionally or unintentionally exclude any segment of our employee population from potential hiring? So for me, it's just straight up bad business to not be an inclusive leader. And I think increasingly we're seeing that to be true. So, in terms of how we're applying it, many have similar themes. For me, it's really about the intentionality with which we're approaching it and every single thing that we're doing. Two, are we consistently following through on the energy and the effort and the initiatives that we're undertaking? And that would also say being, super aware, hyper aware of my personal blind spots and biases as a leader, and making sure that I'm surrounded with people who can help to point those out to me and keep us on track. And that's where our local DEI council has contributed in such a major way to our energy over the last several years.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. So our next question, we are going to be talking about belonging, as inclusive leadership will have to carry inclusive behaviors. And the inclusive behaviors is when we feel that we give everybody the space to be who they are, to be accepted, not because of their differences, not despite of their differences, but because of their differences. And we need them to feel they belong, that they are valued for who they are and not who we want them to be. Belonging is I believe, is the missing piece for the fight of inclusion, because as human beings, we need to belong. Our need to belong is actually innate, as we are social creatures at the heart. So I'm going to start with Dr. Beck on this question. I will direct my next question to you. What does belonging mean to you, to your organization? And what are some concrete steps that you can take to implement or foster that sense of belonging? Dr. Beck?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So let me ground my thoughts in the broader landscape of higher education. The profile of college students today is vastly different than it was when most colleges and universities were founded, some as long ago as a couple of centuries, as a result of both a shift in the demographic landscape across the country, but also a shift in the intentional effort to expand access to higher education to many more students in service of the public good that an educated populace affords a society. So while we at once were really largely a monochromatic representation of students from a middle and upper class family unit who are often funding their children's education, today higher education serves a really rich tapestry of diversity of race, identity, socioeconomic background, educational and life experiences, which I think all really allow us to harness the cultural wealth and aspirational capital of our students, but only if we're able to reimagine the ways in which we advance our teaching and learning mission to truly serve the students on our campuses today and the communities that we seek to serve for generations to come. So I think that in my context, that fundamentally means moving away from a model where universities pride themselves on how selective they are in the admissions process and how many students they turn away, to pride in how many students we welcome and include to realize their greatest aspirations and potential as future leaders who will also advance a brighter and more equitable future. So I think that fostering and facilitating belonging, and we talk about that a lot on campus, it's not only an economic imperative, right? We know the substantive economic impact that a college degree affords both an individual and a community, but it's also a racial and social justice issue. And I think that belonging asks us for more than access, right? It asks us to expand opportunities to really co-create the world that we wish to inhabit with others. So I think inclusion is essential, but inclusivity invites people to participate within existing defined constructs. And I think to your question about belonging really embraces the multifaceted aspects of identity and a welcoming acceptance, a valued voice, and full participation in the co-creation, and in our case, in the educational experience in the educational community. In terms of concrete steps, I really think it's about cultivating an environment where our students and faculty and staff feel seen, supported, and celebrated. And I always think about this work by first embracing the notion of humility. I cannot solely trust my own lens, my own perspective and collection of lived experiences. To truly co-create requires leading by listening and trying to expand as many opportunities as possible for many more voices to be heard in a more distributed leadership. And I think we will know that we have realized belonging when our entire campus, every building and conference room, classroom, and lab really nurtures that sense of belonging for our students, and that they're seen and they really feel a part of the community.
Great, thank you so much. And now I'm going to move to Andrew to hear your thoughts about the question. As we know, belonging, like in case of Dr. Beck, is bringing the students bringing their whole self to campus. And if we are talking about the workforce, is bringing your whole self to work so we can feel that we belong, and our intersectionalities, or even like Dr. Beck said, the layers of who we are accepted so we can feel we are included in the bigger picture. So Andrew, what is your take on this question, and what are your answers, please?
Yeah. So for me, I guess my dream for creating that culture of belonging comes down to, can every single one of our employees feel like they can be their authentic self when they're part of our team and in our office? And I think that authenticity is really the key. Yeah. And so that's something we strive for, and we do it in a couple of different ways. One is we really worked hard to educate and celebrate our differences. And so we have a robust campaign around Did You Know, where we spotlight different segments of our employee population, and where it's completely grassroots and organic, and the employees that want to lean in behind that are the ones contributing the content. And they're just shining a bright light on what makes them unique and different and celebrating those differences. And we've just had tremendous success, and every single time those newsletters and Zoom calls are met with tremendous response and engagement and just positivity. The second thing that we've been doing is really setting up something we called Courageous Conversations, which is really an opportunity in a safe space where we're giving people the opportunity to come forward and have conversations around specific topics, whether that be around raising children with special needs or celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. They've sort of ranged across the spectrum of topics, but similarly giving people the opportunity to have a conversation and to be honest with each other. And again, similarly, just met with tremendous feedback. I, for one, try to sit in on all of them. And there's not a single one of those courageous conversations that I've sat in where I did not learn something new and different about some of the diverse dynamics in our employee workforce. So, but as I said, it's really about, we're striving to create a place where everyone can be their authentic self.
Okay. Thank you so much, Andrew. And now we move to Dr. Thatch. Please, your thoughts.
Thank you so much. So I definitely appreciate Dr. Beck's and Andrew's comments around belonging. And personally, belonging to me means being able to bring your whole best self to work. And I have experienced as a Black woman different times within my career where I did not feel heard or seen or valued. And too often employees like myself may feel invisible and undervalued. So it really is a task for organizations to reach that level where all employees feel as if they belong. And so one of my favorite quotes is from Jesse Jackson, and he says, when everyone is included, everyone wins. But the reality is it takes intentionality to get to this point. And one of the concepts I like to use, especially as a DEI practitioner, and I'm sure you've heard it before, is the Jedi principle. And I use this a lot because, first of all, it's fun. I love Jedis and I love the Star Wars, their trilogies and all of the episodes. But when we talk about the Jedi principles, the J stands for justice, the E for equity, the D for diversity, and the I for inclusion. And I mention this all the time because that's the level of work that has to happen, starting with justice, starting with equity, equality. Diversity, as we all know, is who we are. We're all diverse. We're diverse on this panel. Inclusion takes work. There's this act of intentional inclusion where you're taking extra steps to make sure you're including people. But then we also have to look at, what does justice look like within the organization? And I focus on justice and equity because in order to truly feel like you belong, you have to feel like people hear you, see you, and value you, that you're being treated fairly. And so as leaders within our organizations, when we have situations where employees come to us and they may mention or feel, perception is reality, right, that they're not being treated fairly, that's our opportunity to look at it from an inclusion lens to see how can we be more equitable in how we deal with issues around justice in our workplace. And so I like to use that a lot because people typically don't talk about justice in the workplace.
Yes.
I think but justice, equity are the key to getting to a place of belonging. I feel without those two areas of focus, it will be difficult to reach a place of belonging because people will not feel heard. They will not feel as if they're treated fairly, and they won't feel included. So that's what belonging means to me, and that's what we're doing at my organization. We're taking a lot of time to build psychologically safe spaces, like some of the other my panelist peers mentioned. And it's important, and it takes longer. It takes time. It takes work. It doesn't happen overnight. And I'm excited because personally, there were so many times I didn't feel like I belonged. And so to be able to create those spaces is definitely an opportunity and an honor for me to be a part of that.
Absolutely. And maybe it's my psychiatry background, but whenever I talk about inclusion, I always talk about exclusion. And exclusion is the only emotion that actually touches the pain centers of the brain, that when we have a physical pain, that we feel the same pain as if we were hurt physically. So I always share this as an advocate, as a professional, like, remember sometime that you were excluded. How did you feel? And it could be as easy as not being, or as simple as not being invited to a wedding for one of your friends. How did that exclusion feeling made you feel? And as human beings, let's build bridges and not let other people actually feel that way. Brilliant answers. Thank you so much. We are moving to the next question. And this one is for Andrew. Andrew, this is a direct actually question for you. Why, as a white male, have you so embraced diversity, equity, and inclusion in leadership?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I think, for me, it's been a journey, and I'd be honest. When the journey started out, I had no anticipation of or expectation of being on a panel like this someday, talking about being a white male advocating for diversity, equity, inclusion. But for me, it really started with something that I'm really passionate about in the culture that I'm always striving to build and reinforce in our organization. And that's around the concept of being a positive agent of change. And I just really think that as contributors inside of at least our business community, although I will say I believe it extends beyond our business borders, that we all need to be embracing the concept of being positive agents of change. And for me, that's, one, how are we reacting to change when it's brought upon us? And certainly we have many, many great examples of how that's happened over the last several years. But it's equally important to talk about being a positive agent of change in a proactive way. And how are we looking to drive change constructively for the greater good? And so, I've been on that journey for a long time and in lots of different ways. But certainly last year, the George Floyd murder was kind of a defining moment, a horrible moment, and one that sort of changed the narrative in this country, and certainly for me in my organization here, Hub Los Angeles. And so my reaction to that moment in time was to participate in the narrative and the conversation that was going on. And so my response to it was to reach out to our African-American employees and just check in with them and see how they were feeling, both as just humans, but also as employees, and how were they experiencing us as an employer, me as a leader, the culture that we had in our organization here locally. And I got lots of really good and honest feedback, and for the most part, it was really positive. But one theme that did kind of come out to me was that while there weren't really problems, there were also certainly opportunities for us to do better.
Yes.
And so we sort of adopted this mantra of doing better and doing more together. And so I put my sort of positive agent of change hat on, and then began to really think about, like, okay, well, how can I be a positive agent of change in this moment? How can I help drive doing more and doing better together? And that's really put in motion what we call our LA Voices DEI committee and a lot of other things, and really accelerated the journey that we've been on. But I will say, like, I really don't embrace DEI because I'm a white male leader. As I said, I do it because I really do just genuinely believe that it's the right thing to do for all of us as leaders, both whether you're in the business community or whether you're just a citizen of this world or this country.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Andrew. And I always say, if we go to the basics of being a human being, we can always build those bridges. No matter how different we are, there will always be something to connect us. And we rather look for this, like you said, Andrews. Thank you so much for the work that yourself and the organization does. So I'm going to go to the next question, and we are going to shift gears to inclusive leadership. So Dr. Thatch, I want to ask you, obviously, inclusive leadership will not work without inclusive behaviors that we can apply. So what do you consider healthy, inclusive behaviors that you hope to see in organizations? So I'll start with you.
So I see awareness as the first step to healthy, inclusive behaviors. I hope to see a commitment to continuous awareness and education that supports learning about new experiences and cultures. So often, Sahar, as you know, we often start with education on biases, and you see the bias trainings and different trainings, and I definitely think that is extremely important to have a baseline. But it's also important to have continuous learnings, that we don't stop as organizations with one training, right? How do we activate that training? And so I'm in the process of working with the organization, with Paychecks, in activating the inclusive training that we did take. What's the next step? How do we train leaders to activate inclusion? What did they learn from the inclusive bias trainings, right? And how are they going to apply it? How does it when we do performance management? How does it look when we set goals? And so inclusive behaviors involve being intentional, seeking out individual perspectives throughout the entire employment life cycle. That's another important factor that I want to focus on. It starts not just with applicants and recruiting. A lot of times we want to just recruit in inclusion and recruit diversity, but we want to think about inclusive behaviors throughout the entire employment life cycle, from hire to retire. So looking at ways to apply inclusive behaviors that way. And then also, how do we show community? How do we show inclusivity with our neighbors in our community? What do our philanthropic efforts look like? How did we select those community organizations that our organization choose to support? So we want to look at our hiring processes, we want to look at our internal processes, but we don't want to check the box. We want to embed these behaviors into all of our processes. And it's really important to figure out what works for your organization, where to start to embed these inclusive behaviors into your practices.
Thank you. Thank you. So the inclusive behaviors tend to build psychological safety, where we can build connections between people who might otherwise see themselves as different. Dr. Beck, how would you respond to the same question?
Well, I really appreciated Dr. Thatch's thoughts there, and certainly agree with the imperative for awareness, intentionality, and continuous engagement. I think I would go back to one of the things I said earlier as well, which is leading by listening, and the co-creation of a shared vision certainly come to mind. The proverbial seat at the table, but not just the seat, the engagement in the process of building a shared future together. And I think you would see manifestation of diversity throughout leadership to foster inclusive behaviors. You would see facilitated and organic opportunities to participate in strategy and problem solving. You'll see courage, courageous conversations, as referenced earlier, and inclusive behaviors, both modeled and rewarded. And I think that's really important. I think you'll also see a celebration of identity and whole people, and a clear sense of belonging. And then I think you'll also see leadership celebrating the richness of diversity of the organization as a source of strength and vitality. And ultimately, you'll see that the organization is more innovative and creative and really thriving.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. So again, inclusive leadership is about team members feel that they're treated fairly, their uniqueness is appreciated, and they have that sense of belonging, and they have a voice in decision-making. So it's not enough that they have a seat on the table, but their voices, like Dr. Beck, is heard as well. Andrew, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure I have a lot more to add. I think it's been very well encapsulated. I would just enunciate maybe two things. One is the concept of intentionality. And I just think that you just have to really be intentional and really think about the DEI lens and inclusivity in all of the little decisions that we're making in our organizations every single day. And the second thing would be, at the end of the day, you got to lead by example. And so whether you're the CEO, you're a mid-level manager, or you're a brand new employee to the organization, I think we all have leadership roles and opportunities. And I think that leading by example and the way we show up each and every single day is what creates the culture of the organizations that we're part of. And if you want to have a healthy, inclusive culture, then I always think it starts with yourself and how you're showing up each and every day.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Andrew. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and we are going to talk about allyship. And I know that the word allyship, or being an ally, mean different things to different people, depending on the culture, on the tech context it's used in. For example, for myself, it starts with self-assessment and a hard look in the mirror on what do I have to offer, and also what are my blind spots, and building these stories that, again, I always say build bridges on a human level to understand the experiences of other human beings that we have. That being said, I would like to hear from Dr. Beck. What is your definition of allyship? What does being an ally mean to you, and how that impacted your journey?
Such a good question, and I really liked your definition as well. And so I would embrace all of that. And then I would also say that, again, I think it begins with humility and a willingness to share leadership, but truly listen and to help illuminate historically marginalized voices, and being willing to change, to advance equity, and understanding that power and privilege operate in those spaces. So my own privilege and power, and a real commitment to leverage that privilege to elevate voices and identities. And I think, recognizing the privilege that one holds and the systems in place that allow you to hold it is a really important starting point in allyship. And I think that, as a leader, for me, equity, inclusion, and belonging work is really foundationally rooted in allyship, and something that you referenced earlier, which is really that intention to be a better human to other humans, and a curiosity and a willingness to learn what different communities need to thrive, and to provide places throughout the community that celebrate identity, like on our campuses and universities, like dream centers and pride centers, and places that foster belonging and individuals who hold those respective identities, but also to foster allyship and engagement with individuals who do not. And I think, at the heart of it, being an ally is really learning from, supporting, seeking greater understanding with individuals who hold different identities from the one that you hold, and celebrating the richness that it brings to your own life, knowing that it is a very personal journey, and you have to be ready to walk through that journey, learn, listen, and respond to what it is that you've learned, so that you can continuously get better at it. I think those are my thoughts.
Thank you, especially that I believe that there are different types of allyship, like being a sponsor, a champion, an advocate, a scholar, an amplifier, a confidant. So choose to be one of those is actually what is needed today in the environment that we live in. So I'm going to move to Andrew and ask you, and I know you're very strong and you totally believe in allyship, Andrew. So I would like to hear your take on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love the concept of being an ally. And again, in my journey, I got introduced to the concept of being an unlikely ally. And honestly, that was just something that phrase was not part of my vernacular several years ago. And candidly, I just totally love the concept of being an unlikely ally. And I really try to wear it like a badge of honor. For me, it's just been totally empowering. And it's really accelerated my personal DEI journey. And I really think that every person has the ability to be an unlikely ally. And I think it's really incredibly powerful to be an unlikely ally. I think it's one thing to be an ally for those things that are clearly most important to you and your community and your family and your friends. But I think when you really get outside of that box and you act like an unlikely ally is when you can have the most powerful impact on those around you. So I've really encouraged those around me and other leaders in our organization, the people in our organization, to find those opportunities to be unlikely allies. Again, it goes back to, I think it's the ultimate way to model being a positive agent of change. And I think it's also a great reminder for us that this DEI journey is really for everyone. And there are opportunities for all of us to learn and grow along this journey. I think Dr. Beck talked about the humility of it and the learning. I think that's really important. It's about embracing new cultural perspectives. And for me, the more I acknowledge what I don't know, and the more I open myself up to the learning process, I think the better ally I've been able to become.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, Dr. Thatch, before we say our final thoughts, I would like to hear from you your take on the same question.
Well, Andrew and Dr. Beck, thank you so much for your responses. I would only add that allyship is about having the professional courage to speak up. It's about taking a risk. As a human resources professional for over 20 years, I've seen employees who are terrified to speak up for others and even themselves. And so to be an ally is extremely it's extremely important, but it's a practice of being vulnerable, of having professional courage. When you emphasize social justice and human rights for other members of people who might be in the out group and you're in the in group, it can be extremely uncomfortable. And so
Yes.
being an ally is an exercise in being uncomfortable and getting comfortable and being uncomfortable, and then leading others along the way, them learn how to be okay with being uncomfortable. And the last thing I'll say is it's important to remember as an ally that we need to check in with the people who we are being allies for to make sure that we're actually beneficially meeting the needs of those who we are being allies for, and making sure that we are truly their allies and that they recognize us as an ally. So just checking in with those people who we're allies for
Yes.
to make sure we're still on track. And
Yes.
it's a lot of work, again, and it takes a lot of courage.
But it
So
starts
thank
with
you.
one step at the end. So
Yes,
thank you so much, Dr. Thatch. So before wrapping up, we have probably like 30 seconds each. Your final thoughts or advice or something that you want to leave this panel with. First of all, it has been a great panel. So Dr. Beck, your final thoughts?
Well, I would just say I'm so honored to be a part of this conversation. And I think that this work is so critically important. And I think that it is both a personal and a professional journey. But I am quite confident that if we all lean into this journey, commit to the hard work to intentionally leading from an equity frame, that we can really facilitate the future that we all wish for our communities. And so I'm so grateful every day that I get to facilitate this kind of work at the university, but also in our community. And with peers like all of you, it's been a great conversation, and I appreciate your leadership as well.
Thank you. Andrew, 30 seconds, your final thoughts?
Yeah, again, thank you so much for including me and being part of this esteemed panel. I would just say, I've just totally enjoyed being an ally, the DEI journey that we are going through as an organization here. And I would just encourage everyone to have the courage to lean in behind this and to find their allyship, to find their voice, to be open and vulnerable, and put one foot in front of the other and just consistently execute. And I think it's really amazing what you can accomplish.
Thank you, Andrew. Dr. Thatch, 30 seconds.
Thank you. So thank you. I'm definitely honored to be a part of this panel, and I'm so grateful for these relationships and super encouraged to hear the commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion from our panelists. And I just want to encourage the audience to start wherever you are. You may be on this journey for a long time. You may just be beginning. No matter where you are in the journey, there's a place for you. We need you to continue having these discussions because the work that you're doing will change generations to come. And I do want to end just with a quote from Audre Lorde where she says, "It is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences." So I just want to encourage our audience and everyone listening to celebrate our differences and, as mentioned, and have courage to step forward and to drive DEI initiatives.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And let's remember that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not about tolerance, it's about acceptance. And it's not about assimilation, it's integration. We can always build bridges between each other. Let's make our differences make a difference in the world. That's what I always say. That's what I believe, and that's what I live for every single day. I am totally honored to be in the presence of such a great panel today. I'm actually having goosebumps. So thank you so much for the passion, for the love that you have for DEI that you bring in today. And like Dr. Thatch said, each one of us, and also Andrew and Dr. Beck said that, each one of us can be a change agent. Each one of us can start building a small part of the bridge till we have that bridge where we can connect with each other as human beings. Thank you so much for being part of the journey of DEI. Thank you for your great thoughts and participation today. Like I said, I'm totally honored to be here today. Dr. Beck, thank you. Andrew, thank you. Dr. Thatch, thank you. And thank you, Allyship Times.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your dedication and efforts towards helping organizations create safe environments that foster belonging. It's been a pleasure to celebrate your advocacy and the important part you play in the California business community at large. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for making this event possible with California State University Northridge, GHJ, and Hub International. Please remember to check out the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility magazine featuring executives, champions of DEIA in California across industries. These leaders are impacting change in their organizations and communities to bring awareness towards diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility initiatives. You'll be able to find that issue starting December 19 on the LA Times B2B Publishing webpage, and look there for a video of today's event as well. Thank you all for joining and have a great rest of your day.